What's the first thing Gen Z does when something horrific happens? They make a meme. And it's not because they don't care, it's because they do. Too much sometimes. This talk is about what lies backstage, behind the laugh. Factually speaking, Generation Z refers to people born roughly between 1997 and 2012. They are the first generation to grow up with the internet, smartphones, and social medias from a very young age, making them digital natives. Gen Z is known for being socially aware, politically engaged, and open about mental health, but also for experiencing high rates of anxiety, burnout, and economic insecurity. They have been stereotyped as cynical, overly sensitive, entitled, and even as social media addicts. Born into post 9/11 paranoia, raised during recession, came of age with a pandemic, political unrest, climate change, war, mass shootings, and mental health epidemics. If Gen Z seems too chill about tragedy, it's because we've never known stability. We've learned to laugh as the world burned, not because we found it funny, but because we needed to breathe. So if you were to ask me how I define Gen Z, I'd say we're a generation that laughs first. When Gen Z laughs at a tragedy, the world often gasps. How could they joke about something so horrible? But to understand Gen Z humor, we have to go deeper, backstage. Behind every meme, every ironic post, every viral joke, there's usually pain. Let me walk you through 4 key theories from Zoltan's Joking in the Face of Tragedy that explain why we laugh when it hurts the most. Ambivalence theory, in the context of humor and tragedy, suggests that people often experience conflicting emotions like sympathy and relief, fear and excitement, or sorrow and schadenfreude, which is a German word for feeling pleasure from someone else's bad fate, in response to tragic or uncomfortable events. When a person hears bad news, like a disaster or misfortune happening to someone else, they might simultaneously feel bad for the victim, but also relieved that they're not the ones suffering. This emotional contradiction is hard to process directly, so humor offers a release. Humor, especially dark or ironic jokes, becomes a way to express those mixed feelings without being judged, distance oneself from the pain, and regain control in situations where one feels helpless. In short, ambivalence theory explains how jokes allow people to acknowledge their conflicting feelings, guilt and relief, fear and absurdity, about a tragedy all at once. The joke holds both truths and lets us process the guilt of surviving and the fear of being next. Incongruity theory of humor says that we laugh when there's a mismatch between what we expect and what actually happens, when something is surprising, absurd, or doesn't follow logical patterns. In a tragedy or crisis, our brain expects seriousness, but when someone cracks a joke, especially one that's ironic, dark, or even questionable, it creates a sudden mental clash between the expected, which is pain and sadness, and the unexpected. That clash triggers laughter. Humor arises from the violation of our mental expectations. The joke must be unexpected enough, not too confusing, but surprising. It helps us mentally reframe painful situations, making them feel more manageable. We laugh when something defies expectations, which is nearly everything going on around us. Ever seen the meme about the Titanic submarine tragedy paired with SpongeBob music? That's Incongruity, the horror of a real-life implosion paired with a cartoon soundtrack. It shouldn't be funny, yet people laugh, because brain reacts to unexpected contrast. In Gen Z humor, absurdity is the point. A lot of our world feels senseless. The climate is collapsing, wars start over tweets, the governments are corrupt. So humor mirrors that chaos and turns it inside out. The laugh comes not because it makes sense, but because it doesn't. Disparagement theory explains humor as a way to mock, criticize, or diminish others, especially when we feel superior to them in some way. Usually it's rooted in morality. It says we laugh at people or groups when we see them as flawed, wrong, or vulnerable. Humor comes from punching down, making jokes at the expense of others, whether it's individuals, groups, or institutions. It can reinforce identity, but it also allows people to express aggression, judgment, or discomfort in socially acceptable ways, through jokes instead of direct confrontation. In tragedy or crises, disparagement humor can target authority figures like mocking politicians for their response to disaster, call out hypocrisy, and let people cope through blame, turning anger or fear into laughter. We laugh when someone else is the target, often to release frustration, assert power, or cope with helplessness. Think of it as punching up. Disparagement humor walks a thin line. On one hand, it can be mean. On the other, it can be resistance. When Gen Z makes jokes about billionaires in the White House, it's not because they hate businessmen, it's because they feel powerless in a system where wealth buys survival. The joke becomes a slingshot, a way to mock the powerful and say, "We see you and we're not afraid to laugh." It's not cruelty, it's survival, a way of punching up. If you feel powerless, mocking a tragedy can feel like reclaiming control. Gallows humor is dark, morbid humor made in the face of death, suffering, or hopelessness. It's named after the idea of joking while standing on the gallows moments before execution. It's used to cope with extreme fear, grief, or helplessness. It gives people a sense of control in the uncontrollable and terrifying situations, often shared among those in high-stress environments. Rather than denying the pain, Gallows humor acknowledges it directly, but makes it absurd, ironic, or ridiculous, allowing us to laugh at things we cannot change. It's not about being insensitive, it's a shield, a way to survive mentally, especially common in Gen Z humor, where anxiety, burnout, and dread are widespread. But so is irony. The laugh doesn't mean it's okay, it means we're trying to make it okay enough to keep on moving. Dark humor deals with death, suffering, and taboo topics. It makes the unbearable bearable. It says the unsayable. This is the backbone of Gen Z humor. The COVID jokes, the memes about mental breakdowns, the TikToks that turn suicidal thoughts into dance routines. This is dark humor. It's heavy, it's risky, and it builds community. You scroll and see someone's joke. At least the climate crisis means I don't have to pay off my student loans. You don't laugh because it's a punchline. You laugh because it's your reality too. Suddenly, you feel less alone. And that's what Gallows humor does. It reaches through the screen and says, "You feel this too? I thought it was just me." It's taboo, but it unites. It tells us, you're not the only one who's scared, or tired, or confused. These four theories, ambivalence, incongruity, disparagement, and gallows humor, explain not just why we joke, but why we need to. Especially Gen Z. We've grown up in chaos. We've learned to smile through collapse. And when people ask, how can you joke about that? The real question is, how can we not? It's the only thing keeping us sane. Let's take a look at how and why these theories exist in the media. TikTok has single-handedly turned every Gen Z user into a stand-up comic with a front-row audience. Death of Queen Elizabeth, within minutes there were jokes. Not just about her, but about what she symbolized: generational divides, colonialism, power. More than half of the teens in the US actively use TikTok and are a part of the community the app has created. Humor became a language, one where mourning, anger, and confusion were all welcome. What lies back to of that viral video? Maybe grief, maybe generational reckoning. 42% of Gen Z has a diagnosed mental health condition, and are 28% more likely to have anxiety than any other generation. Therapy is expensive. Humor is free. Dark jokes offer a temporary lift, a dopamine hit in the middle of dread. And it might not be appropriate, but who cares? It's how people get through things. What lies backstage of that meme isn't apathy, it's a panic attack. In World War II, soldiers made jokes in trenches. In hospitals, doctors joke in break rooms. Gen Z does it online. Shared laughter builds bonds. Even absurdity, like the Pope died because of Katy Perry's excursion to space. It's not meant to be literal, it's a scream in disguise. It says, we're all in this together, even if it's all falling apart. Gen Z gets criticized a lot, called heartless, detached, terminally online, but Freud once wrote that the ego insists it cannot be broken, and that is exactly what humor does. It's the ego's last stand, a quiet way of saying, you can't destroy me, not if I'm the one making the joke. Sometimes it's satire, sometimes it's denial. Is it healthy? Maybe not always, but it's real. And for some, it's the only thing that helps. A joke about World War III might be hiding a fear of conscription. A meme about depression might be posted from someone's darkest night. A tweet about the end of the world, it's often written by someone just trying to get through the day. Behind Gen Z's humor isn't emptiness, it's everything: fear, rage, helplessness, hope. Humor is the costume and pain is the actor. Gen Z's humor doesn't just travelize tragedy, it transforms it. When the world gives us absurdity, we give absurdity back. Sharper, funnier, darker. Maybe the joke isn't about the tragedy, it's about surviving it. So when you see us laughing online, don't assume we're numb. Know that we're awake, we're scared, and we're choosing to laugh anyways. Because backstage, we're all trying to hold it together. Thank you for your time.